The house had aged with her. Walls that once shook with childish footsteps now held only echoes. Samantha moved slowly, a worn path from the kitchen to her chair by the window, where she watched the seasons turn with the same patient gaze she once reserved for her boys. She missed the small things, the scuffed shoes piled by the door, the scribbled drawings taped to the fridge, the heavy thud of bodies flopping onto the worn couch, arguments over television shows, the constant hum of life. Sometimes, when the sunlight hit just right, she could almost hear them. Marcus's quiet voice reading aloud, David's laughter bouncing off the walls, Ethan and Evan wrestling until she scolded them, Erin's small hands tugging at her skirt, asking for one more story. The photographs lining the hall caught the afternoon light. Snapshots of a life built slowly, tenderly. First day of school. Birthday cakes with lopsided candles. Graduation caps tossed into a cloudless sky. She paused before one, the 5 of them on the front porch, arms around each other, faces bright with the wild, reckless love only brothers know. She reached out, her fingertips grazing the glass as if she could slip into the picture, settle herself into the moment and stay there, forever suspended in that easy joy. Outside, the roses swayed in the wind, whispering secrets to the fading day. Flashback. The first night home. The boys stood awkwardly in the small living room that first night, clutching the bags that held everything they owned. Samantha remembered how big their eyes were. Too big for their small faces, full of suspicion and longing all at once. She had prepared beds, second-hand bunks. She had scrubbed clean, mismatched sheets carefully tucked in. She had made spaghetti, thinking it was a safe bet, and set the table with chipped plates and the good forks. They ate quietly, spoons clinking against plates. No laughter, no chatter. Only the cautious glances of children who had learned not to trust too easily. That night she lay awake, listening to the house settle, to the soft creak of footsteps padding down the hall. A knock. She sat up, heart pounding, and found Aaron standing in the doorway, his stuffed bear clutched to his chest, his lower lip trembling. Without a word, she lifted the blanket and he crawled in beside her, small and warm, sighing into the darkness. The others came too, one by one, nights later. They didn't speak. They just slipped into her presence, into the circle of her arms, seeking something unspoken, a place to belong. And she gave it to them, wordlessly, unconditionally. The roses were in full bloom when Samantha first felt the tightening in her chest. She was kneeling, pulling weeds with slow determination when the world tilted ever so slightly. She sat back on her heels, pressing a hand to her chest, and waited for the sensation to pass. It did, but it left a shadow. At the doctor's office, she listened without interruption. Words like heart strain, fatigue, and rest floated in the sterile air between them. Back home, she brewed tea and sat by the window, the cup warm in her hands. She watched a mother wrangle her 2 children into a stroller across the street, her movements harried but tender. Samantha smiled, remembering how hard it had been. School forms, scraped knees, late-night fevers, all the tiny, invisible threads that wove a family together. She wondered if her sons remembered, if they knew the weight of every choice she made for them. They did. That weekend they gathered, Marcus serious as always, David pacing restlessly, Ethan and Evan exchanging glances, Aaron with his hand resting on Samantha's frail shoulder. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Love doesn't always require words. 3. The Mama Sam Foundation. The house was filled again, not with the raucous noise of boys, but with something quieter, heavier. A kind of anticipation. Samantha sat, the shawl draped over her knees, her hands neatly folded. The folder in Marcus's hands looked small, but her heart beat louder than it had in years. He came closer, kneeling slowly so they were eye to eye. "We've been working on something," he said, his voice a low thread. Samantha took the folder with a care she reserved for sacred things. She opened it, the paper crackling faintly. The Mama Sam Foundation. Plans spilled out before her. Homes, schools, safe places. Photographs of land already purchased, designs already drawn. Smiling faces she didn't know yet, but somehow loved already. David leaned in. "We named it after you, Mama." "For kids like us," Ethan added. "To give them what you gave us," Evan whispered. Aaron said nothing. He only placed his hand over hers, warm, steady, familiar. Samantha blinked against the flood rising behind her eyes. She traced the names, the faces, the dreams. She saw beyond the words, to the nights spent reading by a dim lamp, to the days spent fighting to keep the electricity on, to the quiet, desperate prayers she whispered into the darkness when the boys were sick or scared, or simply too fragile for a world that didn't know how to love them. All of it, every scraped knee, every lost job, every lonely night, had led to this. The boys leaned in, expectant, but she didn't speak. She only smiled, a slow, luminous thing that lifted the lines from her face, and in that silence, they knew. They had always known. Marcus, silent and withdrawn after a bad day at school. David, fighting the world and sometimes her. Ethan and Evan, wild, impossible to separate, impossible to reason with. Aaron, small and angry, afraid of being left. She remembered sitting on the floor one night, the bills spread around her like fallen leaves, the weight of it pressing on her chest. Aaron had come and sat beside her, his little hand creeping into hers. "Are we gonna be okay, Mama?" She had smiled then, a broken, tired smile. "We already are," she whispered, squeezing his hand. She believed it, not because it was easy, but because they needed her to. The first children's home opened in late spring. The building wasn't grand, but it was full of light, wide windows, soft colors, walls that welcomed rather than confined. Samantha walked the halls slowly, her cane tapping a rhythm only she heard. The children ran to her without hesitation. They clutched her skirts, their hands sticky from crafts and snacks, their faces upturned with unfiltered joy. They didn't know her history. They didn't know about the nights she cried silently into her pillow, or the mornings she faced the world, bone-tired but smiling. They only knew love. She sat on a bench beneath a blooming magnolia tree and watched them. A little girl with tight curls and a missing front tooth clambered into her lap, settling there as if she had always belonged. Samantha's fingers found the girl's hair, smoothing it back, her palm warm against the small, strong back. "You're safe now," she whispered. It wasn't a promise, it was a vow. As the foundation grew, Samantha visited less, her body slower, her breath shorter, but her heart remained stitched into every corner, every new wall, every laugh echoing through the halls. At night, she would sit on her porch, her cup of tea cooling in her hands, watching the stars prick the sky. She thought of her boys, of the children she would never meet, of the lives unfolding, because she once dared to love 5 broken little souls. The wind would stir the chimes above the door, a soft, sweet sound, and Samantha would close her eyes and smile. The morning came on quiet feet. Sunlight crept through the curtains, painting long golden stripes across the floor. The house smelled faintly of roses and old wood, of memories tucked into corners like forgotten toys. Marcus found her in her chair, the shawl tucked neatly around her shoulders, her hands folded over a worn book, one she had read 100 times, its spine cracked, its pages soft from years of turning. Her face was peaceful, turned slightly toward the window, as if she were watching for someone. She was gone. But the room was full of her. The memorial was held in the largest hall the town had. People came. Neighbors, former students, children from the foundation now grown and thriving. Some carried flowers. Some carried only stories. The walls echoed not with grief, but with gratitude. There were no grand speeches, only moments. A young woman stood up, a former orphan who had found her first real home through Mama Sam. She spoke simply. "She taught us that love doesn't end when you leave the room. It stays, it builds, it becomes you." Her sons stood shoulder to shoulder, pride and sorrow woven together in their faces. They didn't list accomplishments or achievements. They spoke of bedtime stories, of spaghetti dinners, of a woman who, with nothing but her hands and her heart, built an empire of love. The Mama Sam Foundation flourished. It expanded beyond towns, beyond borders, homes, schools, scholarships, second chances where there once were none. And everywhere, in every smiling child, every open door, every hand held out to someone lost, Samantha's love lived on. Not carved in marble, not etched in history books, but written where it mattered most, in hearts. She had built a kingdom without thrones, a legacy without monuments, and somewhere in a quiet house where the wind stirred the chimes and roses bloomed defiantly against time, Samantha smiled.